comes to mind when you hear retired lifestyle? Having time to travel, focusing on hobbies, relaxing and living carefree. I'm Connell Alsop, and for me, retired lifestyle means that I have time to focus on my DIY projects, some of which are very simple and others that are more time consuming. Of course, some might say that my hobby is working on home improvement projects. In today's video, I will show you how to install a faucet and drain in a bathroom. And it's a bathroom that I'm currently renovating. I hope you find this information helpful. Before I start any new project, I always begin by inspecting the work area. And the reason I do that is so that I can anticipate any problems that I might have. Of course, there's always problems that are unanticipated, but you try to minimize the unknown. So what I like to do is to look at the area, and in this particular case, there's not a lot to inspect. The reason why I am renovating my bathroom, and I'm at the point where I've installed the new vanity and there is a new countertop. The new countertop was installed by the countertop company who sold me the countertop. It's a quartz countertop and it's very heavy. If it wasn't so heavy, I would have just done it myself, which would have helped me in one aspect of what I'm doing now. Normally, or it's suggested that if you're installing a new sink, you install the faucet before you install the sink, because then you've got access to all the parts which are normally underneath the vanity, and it's a lot easier to work with. But in this case, unfortunately, the sink and the countertop was installed by the countertop company. So I'm left with actually installing it after the fact. So I've got a few obstacles I need to overcome, and I just want to quickly show you what I look at. First thing you always want to look at is the holes. Now, when I had this manufactured, they asked me about the holes because the faucets come in various widths. This is 4 inches. There are also bathroom faucets that are 8 inches wide. And so if you're having it fabricated, you want to know, because you've got to tell the fabricator how far apart is your faucet. If you are buying it over the counter and it's already pre-drilled, then you want to know this so that you know what size faucet to buy. Are you buying one that is 4 inches? Are you buying one that's 6 inches? Are you buying one that's 8 inches? And that's an important piece. And the reason I say it like that is because don't think because you may like a kitchen faucet and say, you know what, that looks great, that could look good in my bathroom. It may not fit the holes. Now there are 3 holes here, and the reason why is if for some reason all you want is the single pedestal faucet, you use the center one, and then there's a plate that covers the other that comes with the faucet. There's a plate that will cover the other 2 holes. And if you are using the standard type faucet, you're not using the middle hole, and it doesn't create a problem because it will be covered anyways. And I'll get to that in a few moments. So now I've looked at that. Now you've got the drain, and then I go underneath. Ordinarily, before I go down, ordinarily what would happen is that you disconnect the plumbing from the drain, and the drain remains intact so that when you're ready to install your new faucet, it's there. In my particular case, when I was doing my renovation, I noticed that the drain pipes were made of metal and they had corroded and they were already crumbling. So I wanted to replace it. So let me show you underneath. And I've actually removed the drain. The only thing that's there is the part that's in the wall. And then I'm buying new drain parts, which is the other reason why, by the way, you survey the area, because you want to know what materials, what parts you need to buy. The other thing is my shutoff valves are already off. So that's there. But what I did is, which I'm sorry I didn't record this part, I replaced the shutoff valve, and I'm glad I did. Many of you will have the type of shutoff valves where you're constantly turning until it turns off. This particular shutoff valve, which I'm not going to turn on because the water will squirt out, this particular valve only has a quarter turn and it's already on. So when I replaced it, I said, well, I'm not going to replace it with the old style shutoff. Why not get a newer one? And it's a lot easier to shut on and off. So that's step one, is looking at your area. And then the next thing that I do is, here's my new faucet, and I insert that in there because what I really want to do is, I've got to buy, which I already bought, I've got to buy some hoses. And the hose has to attach to the bottom of this and at the top of the shutoff valve. So what I generally do is I insert that so that I can take my tape measure, and hopefully you can see this. So here's my faucet inside the hole. So I want to measure from the bottom of this hole to the top of this. And the reason why is, remember what we just did. You've got one end of the hose that's connected to the top of the faucet, and then the bottom end is going to be connected there. So I need to know the distance between the top of where the faucet is to here, so that I know how long of a hose to buy. These hoses come in various lengths. So you want to get a length that's close enough, as close to your particular faucet. In my particular case, and hopefully I've done this right, I bought a 16-inch length. What do I want to call this? It's not called a faucet. It's a valve. And I bought 16 inches. They come in 12 inches. They come in 20 inches. And I felt that the 16-inch is what I needed. So that is my first step, is making sure I know what I need, what I anticipate, and I also had to buy the drain. Remember, mine was crumbling, so I had to buy a new drain, and I'll talk about that in a few moments. Before actually connecting the faucet to the countertop, I want to kind of walk you through some steps, because it's a little more difficult once I'm underneath the inside the vanity underneath the countertop in order to describe it. So let me give you just a few pointers here. So remember we talked about the 3 holes? If I didn't make it clear when I was talking about 4 inches, 6 inches, 8 inches, what I didn't make clear is the fact that you're really looking at these holes. This is the distance between the faucet itself. These are 4 inches apart. And then again, you can get them, particularly if you get the newer style faucets where each one of these pieces are separate, they're usually further apart. You need holes that are further apart. Most of the one-piece assemblies are going to be 4 inches, unless you did what I mentioned and you wanted to use a kitchen faucet in a bathroom. But the connection part is what I want to show you next. And what I did is I cut a piece of scrap material just to simulate what would happen. So now we've got, pretend like this is the actual sink, and I place the hole, and you'll notice that center hole is covered up. Okay, so now let's pretend we're underneath the sink, that this is actually here, and we're underneath the sink to replace it. So let's use my assembly here. And what comes with the faucet, let me find the parts, are these pieces. And what they're intended to do is, this is what's going to secure So you tighten this by hand as much as you can. And then now you're looking at, let's say this was the actual countertop. Now you've got the piece in order. Now don't be tempted. You might think, well, I'll put this on before I insert this in here. If you did that, remember this is just a sample. You'd never be able to screw this on. So you need to make sure, unfortunately, even though it looks efficient, you can't put this on when you insert the faucet in the hole because you've got to screw these pieces on and then you can put that on. Hopefully that makes sense. Okay, let's go to the next step. I'm going to just take that off because I want to show you something real quick here. And I'm doing this because it's going to be very difficult to explain once I'm underneath attaching everything. So now, again, let's now look at the part, and underneath here, there is this plastic piece. Now, you're going to have to use your own comfort level with regard to this. The reason this plastic piece is there is because once this is tightened, this is pressed against the countertop to prevent leaks. The instructions don't tell you to do this. That's why I say you have to, it's your own comfort level. Plumber's putty can be used, and that gives you an added seal, but it isn't required. It just depends on whether you want that extra protection or not. The other thing while I'm thinking about this, when you bought your faucet, you've got to look at the distance that's here. Because if you have one of those pop-up valves, that pop-up, some of them are in the actual faucet itself. Some are placed a little bit protruding outside the faucet. You don't have a lot of space back here. So make sure when you're shopping for your faucet, you know what your countertop looks like. The good news is there is a little play because the holes that have been bored are bigger than these holes. Okay, so now you've got this, and if you want to use plumber's putty, you've got to be careful. There's the basic plumber's putty, and all it says on here is for setting bowls, fixtures, faucets, sink frames, and strainers. Now you may be able to find the fine print. If you look on the back of this one, this just says plumber's putty. It says do not use on plastic, and then it tells you that you're to use silicone sealant instead. Do not use on marble, granite, limestone, or other dimensional stone. There is one, and hopefully you can see it. And the reason why, just so you know, if you use the standard type putty, it could stain your countertop. This is stain free, and it says plumber's putty, and it says for use on granite, marble, quartz, sandstone, and corian. My countertop is quartz, so I'm using this particular product. It's still a putty, and again, the reason you use the putty is to seal so that you don't get any leaks, but you're not required to if your faucet comes with this piece here. You're not required to. It's just added protection, and it's your own personal preference. I tend to do an overkill. So what I will be doing is adding plumber's putty to this. And let's see here if I can. And the way you use plumber's putty is interesting because this is a little tighter. Anyone that has used a standard plumber's putty would know. So you want to create a rope. And you also want to make sure your surface area is free of any dust. And what you want to do is you're going to place it around. I'm going to need a second piece because I didn't, well, I can thin this out just a little bit more. And once you create this rope and you press it in, it's going to ooze out, which you scrape off a little later after you're done. But that's what you would do. You would place that in and press it down. And again, as you're tightening underneath, as you can see already, it's starting to ooze out. As you're tightening underneath, it will then ooze out even more. And before you finish tightening, make sure you come back up and look to see if the distance is even. The distance between the backsplash and the faucet is even. So I'm going to do that, which you won't see, which is why I wanted to show you. But what I'm going to be doing is what we already talked about. And I should have done one more thing. I think I'm going to pull this off for a second here. The other thing that's going to happen underneath that I want to show you before I do get underneath is I'm going to be eventually connecting this hose to the bottom of the faucets. And also to get a good seal, what you will find is Teflon tape. And it's very inexpensive. In fact, I'm thinking it may even cost less than $1, but it comes, you will see it in the plumbing section looking like this. But be careful about your selection of this also, because they also sell one for pipe that is used for gas lines. This one's used generally for metal and for water type sealing. And I'm not going to leave this on, but just to give you an idea, all you do is to wrap this Teflon tape around. You wrap it around several times. And you're supposed to wrap it in the direction that this nut, the nut that's on this hose, you're wrapping it so that the wrap is going in the direction that when you tighten it, it will go. Again, I can't leave this on because I still have to put, if I were to leave it on and then put this part that connects the faucet to the bottom of the countertop, it will strip out, it will remove that, so there's no point in putting it on. So now let me put this back. And I'm going to go underneath to screw these on. And while I'm under there, I may as well put the Teflon tape. You also use this Teflon tape on the shut-off valve. The threads of the shut-off valve, you're going to be using those because remember, there's two ends. And I'm glad I mentioned that because you need to make sure you buy the right holes. Because this side is larger than this side. So you need to do, what I do is, if I'm not certain, in this particular case, this says this is a half inch, 3/8 inch, half inch to faucet, 3/8 inch to valve. What I do when I'm in the store, if least bit of doubt, I always go and I find a faucet and I make sure that the connections work, or take your existing faucet that you're going to be, if it's a brand new faucet at the time, take it over and make sure that the fittings will work at that point. The other thing that I do, I forgot to mention when I said you look to see what supplies that you buy, I buy a few extra pieces and then I return what I don't need. So I'd rather do it that way than not to have what I need. So now I'm going to go under the sink and do what I need to do, and we'll be back. Okay, now I'm under the sink and you can see the connections. If you notice in the center ring here, you can see that the plumber's putty is there, that's oozing out. And I've connected the hose, as well as, let me reposition myself here. It's now connected to the water line. And if you'll notice, you'll see the white, that's the Teflon tape that I made reference to. The Teflon tape is connected to the shutoff valve, and you also can see where it's connected to the hose. So the only thing left to do with this part is to remove that plumber's putty, and it's very soft. So it can be very easily removed. And the excess can be reused. And then what you can do, I didn't bring I don't have a screwdriver close at hand, but you would take a screwdriver and get rid of all this excess here and scrape all of that off. And that's all it is. So the next thing we want to do is to put in the drain and the stopper. The next step in our assembly is to install the drain. And this particular drain has a pop-up. Instead of what you remember the traditional pull-up piece, this one does not. It's the first time I've ever purchased one like this, so I'm hoping it works better than the pull-up, because after a while the pull-up sometime will come loose and you have to go under the sink and reconnect it. But again, this is a pop-up that does not require the pull-up that you're accustomed to seeing. So this particular one comes with an assembly, very easy. Remove that. These two pieces go under the sink, and this part of the assembly is on top. Ordinarily, and this is the first time I've encountered this, ordinarily I would put plumber's putty in this area for the seal. And unlike what I use for the faucet, I'd use regular plumber's putty because this is not granite, marble, quartz, Carrarian. This is just a porcelain sink, so the regular plumber's putty would have worked here. What I don't honestly know, and maybe the instructions you'll be able to find out, rather than going to the expense of purchasing two separate types of putty, if the putty that works for granite and marble would work on porcelain, I would recommend you just use that as opposed to going to the expense. In my particular case, I happen to have the regular plumber's putty if I needed it, but this one, and you may not be able to get a good eye, this actually has a rubber seal on it, and I think it would create me more problems, which contradicts what I said about the faucet, where as an insurance marker, just to be safe, I added the plumber's putty, but because of this very thick rubber piece, I don't want to put plumber's putty on. So what I am going to do is insert this and then go underneath and connect the two of these, which will only take a few moments. So that's my next step. So what I'm doing, I'm underneath here, and I'm just connecting the rubber piece, the two pieces underneath there. And then you tighten. It's all plastic, so you don't want to over tighten. Okay, I think we're all set there. So now we're under this sink, and you may not be able to see it very closely, but that was a rubber piece that went in here, and then this was hand tightened. And we've done that, so our next step is to connect the drain from the sink to the drain in the wall. This is where having taken a picture before you disassembled the drain in the old sink really comes in handy, because it gives you a general idea, even though you may not hook it up identical, it gives you a general idea of how it should be connected. So in this particular case, we've already talked about the drain from the sink that was just installed. And then this is the drain leading into the wall. So what you need to do is you've got to connect this to this. And in order to do that, you're going to need something, and it's called a P-trap. And it comes in a kit. And it's got all the pieces that you need. And what's contained in here, the way this is all going to be assembled, you're going to have this piece is going to be connected to the trap itself. Ordinarily, what would happen is these are washers, and the washers, there's a little groove in here, and the washer rests in here so that when the pipe is connected and the cap is screwed on, you get a watertight seal. The only time you don't need this washer, and I shouldn't say the only time, but is notice that this piece is shaped very similar to the washer. And it connects to this, to the trap. So it has its own sealing mechanism. The other piece is here. And by the way, before I forget, for bathrooms, generally they are 1 1/4 inch diameter pipes that you need. Kitchens are 1 1/2 inch. Now, what they've done when this home was built, in fact, I happen to know this home was built in 1979, the drain coming out of this bathroom wall is 1 1/2 inches. So what I had to do was to buy a reducer from 1 1/2 inch down to 1 1/4 inch. And that reducer came with a cap that already has a built-in washer. So I don't need, you usually need a washer, but because of the way remember this part has a built-in washer and this cap has a built-in washer, all I have to do is to connect this in order to connect it to the wall. So I'm going to screw this in. And you don't want to tighten everything until you're all done because you may have to make some adjustments along the way. But the important thing that you'll notice, and I want to tighten this so you get an idea, is that we still have to connect this to this. And so they sell extensions, also 1 1/4 inch. I bought two. They sell a 6-inch extension and a 12-inch extension. And at the time, I did not know whether a 6-inch extension would be long enough. And to save time, I bought a 12-inch extension also. Now, I could have just bought the 12-inch extension and I could have cut off, this is plastic, and I could use a hacksaw and I could have cut off the excess. But I said, well, I'm there enough that if I have to bring it back as for a refund, I'd rather do that than cut it off if I don't have to. So again, I bought both the 6-inch and the 12-inch. So now you also need, for the extension, you need a washer, and this is for the excess pipe from the drain to rest in. Very similar to what's here. You're going to see that in a few moments. And then the washer is going to seat there. So what you have to do is you put the cap on first, and then you place the washer on top of that. Or I should say underneath it. And you're going to do the same thing here. You're going to put this cap on, because what's going to happen is, I'm going to loosen this a little. This is going to rest inside of this piece. And this piece, because notice how it is, this will rest inside of that piece. So both of them have even this trap has this piece there. So you've got room, even if you cut it a little short, you've got room that it won't create a leak because of that. So in order to do this, I need to disconnect this so that I can slide this in and then reconnect. If you don't feel that you're strong enough to tighten by hand, although I don't recommend it, what you could use are channel locks, but be very careful because you don't want to break anything, and you could use channel locks in here and tighten it that way. But if you can, tighten it by hand, and then you can run water and see whether it's leaking, and if it is leaking, maybe you need to tighten it a little bit more. Okay, I think I'm all set. So now we need to run our test. So in order to do so, first thing I want to do is I'm going to turn on the water. And remember I mentioned those valves? Usually have to turn a long time to turn the water on and off. But the new ones that I put on here are only a quarter of a turn. So I'm going to turn those on. And I'm going to plug up the sink so that the water can run into the sink. That way I can fill up the sink, and when I'm done checking for water leaks for the faucet, I can unplug the sink and let it go down the drain so I can see how it's draining. So now I'm going to stop up the sink and run the water into the, so I can see how the drain is working. You don't need to fill it up completely, but enough so that when you do unstop it, you can watch the water drain and see whether there are any leaks, inspect for leaks. What I'm looking for right now is any leaks in the water line. And I don't like to just visually inspect. I like to feel in touch to see if I feel any moisture, as well as underneath the sink, the part that's connected to the faucet. Okay. Doesn't appear to be any leaks there. Next step is now to unstop the sink so that the water can flow down the drain, and I will inspect that. I'm going to wipe my hands since I had it in the sink for the stopper. No signs of water leaks there. I still like to come back a day or two each day and just inspect to make sure that there's no water that's possibly started seeping out that I didn't notice during my test. But you, by all means, you always want to run your test. And before I forget, in case I didn't mention, the water lines are designed that the left-hand side is always hot and the right-hand side should be cold. So I'm running and putting my finger underneath the left-hand side to make sure hot water is coming out, and it is. Just to be safe, right-hand side has cold water coming out. So that completes our test. That completes our installation. Until the next time.